Good morning. Today is November 20th, and this is the LaRouche Organization Morning Update. First of all, I want to encourage everybody to tune in at 11 a.m. today on the EIR.news platform, where there will be a Zoom meeting entitled President Trump, Don't Do It, an alternative American policy for the Caribbean. This, of course, has to do with the apparently looming planned illegal, unconstitutional, and disastrous invasion of Venezuela, supposedly because they're flooding our country with drugs. And as we have said many times, if you want to stop the drug trade, go after Wall Street. It is completely against international law and the U.S. Constitution to blow up people in boats with no due process, no trial, and it's counterproductive because once they're dead, how do you find out, presuming they are drug traffickers, who their bosses are and how the trade is organized? So please tune in at 11 a.m. This discussion will feature Helga Tsepp-LaRouche, Dennis Small of the EIR Ibero-American desk, President Ramotar, the former president of Guyana, diplomats from Venezuela, Ray McGovern, I believe, and I will be a respondent. Now, otherwise, in Ibero-America, a friend of LaRouche, the LaRouche movement, and the Schiller Institute, Julio DeVito, who had been part of the Kirchner government. He is the former director of planning and public investment, has been sentenced to 4 years in prison. He has been sent to prison. It is feared his life is in danger. He's spoken at a number of Schiller Institute conferences. So we will be watching the case of Julio DeVito closely. Now, on major news, the world is really in a turning point, a crossroads where everything is in flux. According to Axios News, Steve Witkoff and the head of the Sovereign and Direct Investment Fund, Kirill Dmitriev, have actually continued talks in the spirit of Alaska and are working on a proposal to end the Ukraine-Russia proxy war, which is much bigger, which takes into account the security considerations of all of Europe. And according to Dmitriev, he is optimistic about this and says, finally, unlike previous times, the concerns of Russia are actually being heard. Now, apparently, the Kremlin is saying something not so optimistic, but President Trump did send the Army Secretary Dan Driscoll, along with a couple four-star generals, to Ukraine to, quote unquote, restart the peace process. So maybe that's moving. Now, there is a question after the corruption scandals are breaking, et cetera, whether Zelensky is going to remain as the acting president of Ukraine. He is illegitimate because he canceled elections, so he doesn't have constitutional authority to be there. And as everyone knows, he is indeed very corrupt. There were rumors, for example, last weekend that he might just hang out in Greece and not come back. That remains to be seen, but hopefully this would be moving to an end. On the other hand, the U.S. ambassador to NATO, Matthew Whitaker, is saying the Europeans are not being aggressive enough toward Russia. So conflicting messages coming from the Trump administration. This seems to always be the case. And I think it makes the world more dangerous, and President Trump himself consistently changing what he's saying, I think would be very confusing for people trying to deal with us diplomatically. Now, Israel-Palestine. The killing of the Palestinian people by Israel continues, not at the same rate of bombing and shelling as previously before the Trump plan. But I think 28 people were killed, 28 Palestinians were killed by the Israelis yesterday. However, Gideon Levy in Haaretz wrote an article yesterday where he said that in his view, Israel is finally being cut down to size, Netanyahu is being put in his place by President Trump, that Israel doesn't get to call the shots. I don't know. I think there is some truth to that. Israel was told that they cannot take over the whole West Bank. President Trump had to respond to the Arab and Muslim nations who said that they would support the peace deal, but Israel cannot take over the West Bank. However, the violations of human rights there are continuing. And this reconstruction plan, what it actually is, really remains to be seen. We really need the Oasis plan of LaRouche. Also, there is more motion on the case of Marwan Barghouti, a Fatah party leader who has been in prison in Israel for 20 years, has learned Hebrew, is a remarkable individual, is seen widely as being the Nelson Mandela of the Palestinian people. And he's one of the people who could actually help to organize a Palestinian state. He is highly respected, not only by the Palestinian people, but by any Israelis of goodwill who've been working on the peace process. And he's been horrifically abused while in prison in Israel and should be released. So hopefully we'll hear more on that. Now, in the United States, I have spoken about lately, President Trump seems to be unaware that he's really lost his base. He tried to hide it by coming around and telling the Republicans that they should support the release of the Epstein files, which they did. But that wasn't Trump's position, and he only had to do that because people like Marjorie Taylor Greene, Lauren Boebert, and other Republican congressmen and women primarily refused to buckle. They felt justifiably a certain loyalty to the women, the victims, now women, then girls, of Epstein and his cabal of clients. These crimes are very serious. They should be addressed. However, what's being neglected, and Harley Schlanger is doing a series on this, is Epstein's role in the financial world. It's not only likely that he was a Mossad asset, also tied to the CIA and MI6, but to what end? And if you think about the role he played interfacing with Jamie Dimon and others, the role he probably played in persuading then President Bill Clinton to repeal the Glass-Steagall separation of the banks, the infinite amount of drug money laundering and other horrible activities carried out by the billionaire club. This is what we have to look at on the Epstein case. So President Trump could not stop the files from being released. Therefore, he called on Republicans to release them so it wouldn't be a loss. The younger base of the MAGA movement remains opposed to Israel's war crimes. They don't want to arm Israel. They don't want to fund Israel. They don't like that it seems to be that we are more concerned about the fate of the Israeli population than the American population. That's how they would put it. And this is also a major rift. And the rejection of the Israeli genocide, which is visible to the eyes of the world, was seen very clearly in the overwhelming victory of Zohran Mamdani as the new mayor of New York City. And I say this not because I particularly have any hope that Mamdani is going to be able to address the ills of the city, nor do I support the kinds of economic policies that he is talking about. But it indicates that the population has had it, including emphatically Jewish New Yorkers who do not want to support Bibi Netanyahu's war crimes. And I think it indicates that AIPAC, the Zionist lobby, the billionaire elites are not going to control American politics in the same way as in the past. Another factor that's turning many Americans against President Trump and his policies is the ICE policy, the immigration policy, where they are getting more and more aggressive to make their quotas in deporting people, including by going to law offices. I heard a case of this just today in California, where the husband of an American was working through the system. He'd just been approved in the first phase of his immigration, and the ICE agents actually came to the meeting with the lawyer and abducted him. So these are not drug pushers and criminals, the people that Americans were concerned about. These are people who are hardworking, upstanding, trying to go through the legal process, who are being treated in a barbaric fashion. And it is hurting the American economy, actually, and it is ripping up communities. And while many Americans are not speaking out against this as much as they might, this is something that I know that people who supported President Trump did not intend to have happening. And finally, the economy is terrible. The price of gasoline has not gone down. The cost of living is high. Wages are down, and we don't have a skilled workforce. It was recently reported, I think it was Ford, that was looking for 5,000 mechanics, jobs that pay $120,000 a year. They can't find the workers with the skills. I might add, in some cases, I know it's an issue of people being able to pass drug tests with all this drug legalization. We have to address this crisis, and the only thing that will work is what LaRouche called for, his 4 laws. And I can tell you shortly, the LaRouche organization will be leading a mobilization, as we have in years past, to get the Glass-Steagall Act reinstated, to go to city councils, legislatures, the Congress. That is the first step toward the bankruptcy reorganization so badly needed. We have an AI bubble which is about to explode, implode. People have, like the state of New York and state of Pennsylvania, have pension funds tangled up in this thing. Unless this is addressed in an orderly, preemptive fashion, we are going to have one chaotic crash. So we need to implement LaRouche's 4 laws and the Glass-Steagall Act. So that's what I have for today. Please do tune in at 11 a.m. for the Stop Trump on Venezuela, Stop the Invasion of Venezuela roundtable. Talk to you soon.